Good morning, everyone. I am Sister Mary Han Nguyen. I am the Director of Children Faith Formation for St. Simon Church in Los Altos. Welcome the parents. I want to introduce you to our speaker today. It's Claire Frazier Izagira. She had a license, a marriage license and family therapist, former ordained minister, and family life consultant, specializing in premarital consultant, couples therapy, marriage enrichment, anxiety reduction, stress and time management, and counseling lay minister. She had over 30 years of professional experience helping couples and families. She holds a master's degree in Fuller School of Psychology and Theology. She spent 1 year at the Institute of Holy Land Studies in Jerusalem, specializing in biblical study and ecumenical dialogue. She had developed formation program for campus ministry, family and children ministries, lay leadership formation, women in ministry, and community outreach. With her husband, Dr. John Izagira, she has co-authored Thriving Marriages, an inspirational and practical guide to lasting happiness, which have been translated into Spanish and Italian. They co-direct the California Pro Social Institute in Irvine, California. Every year, thousands of people from all over the United States involved in marriage and family life ministries participate in their formation program. And I am honored to listen to many of her talks at many conferences. And I want to introduce you to her. Welcome, Claire.
Thank you, Sister Mary Han. It's a joy to be with you in this very first session, kicking off Building Unity and Living Happier Lives. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate.
There you go.
All righty, we are ready. Okay, everybody, you can see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Very good. Well, it's a delight to be with all of you, kicking off this Building Unity and Living Happier Lives series that Sister Mary Han is offering through the church and to the community, and I'm just blessed to be part of it. And so this first talk, which is boosting our communication, is such an important one in building unity. And it's truly one of my favorite topics. You can see, you may want to write down our website, thrivingfamilies.com, for any additional help through our resources. But I'm going to go ahead and start with the art of being family. It's so important to know how to be family, of course, in our own families, but also with everybody. To these skills that you're going to be learning this morning during this hour are going to be skills that you can use in your immediate family, in your extended family, with your ministry, in your work environment. These are just beautiful skills of how to love the way Jesus loves. And some of you have the handout, and I selected John 13:34, love one another as I've loved you, is kind of our key guiding verse for this particular talk. And it starts off with some particular skills. And you'll see these four skills here. These are actually going to be the talks I give today on communication. And then I hope you all come back and catch me for how to solve problems, integrating our differences, and then another presentation on forgiveness and restoring unity. All of these skills are so essential in knowing how to do what Jesus wants us to do, which is to love one another as he has loved us. And I wanted to highlight, even though today I'm just going to be speaking about communication, in another talk I'll be talking about integrating our differences and solving our problems, and then in another talk how to forgive and restore unity. Which, by the way, the forgiveness Assertiveness talk is coming up this Tuesday. And so I invite all of you to Zoom in on that and then just follow the calendar of events to catch the other talks. But this morning I wanted to highlight communication, but first start off with compassionate acceptance, because, you know, we can learn a lot of skills, but if we don't have the right attitude of compassionate acceptance, we won't get very far. And so I wanted to highlight this essential way of being with everybody, is to be able to accept others as they are without trying to change them. Of course, this is hard for us, especially if we disagree with them, because we all kind of are control freaks to some degree, right? And so to be able to accept others as they are without trying to change them is the very first commitment we make in compassionate acceptance, to let others be as they are and not trying to go over and change them. Another very important part of compassionate acceptance is once we're accepting them as they are, and you know, they can be at different levels of functioning. Some are high functioning, some are medium functioning, some are very low functioning in their interactive skills. Wherever they are, let's then start to understand their needs and make them our needs. Find out, what do they need? And you can be assured that every single one is going to need to be heard and understood. I'll be sharing how to communicate well, but it helps us to start focusing on understanding their needs and making their needs our own. And then to not just identify their needs, but to then love them as they want to be loved. You know, this helped me so much with my elderly parents. They have since passed and gone to heaven. But in the latter days, they were really not doing well. And they were, their level of functioning was going down farther and farther. And any of us who know, have had that experience of losing loved ones in our family know that as they age, they often don't age very well. And so with my parents, I made a real effort to put on the mind of Christ, to really see them through the eyes of God, how he sees them and how to love them and to accept them as they are. Their level of functioning was way down here. They weren't at the level of functioning they were when they raised us. So I had to keep adjusting my expectations to accept them, not just tolerate them, but to accept them fully and to understand their needs and to be flexible, to keep loving them the way they needed to be loved. So this compassionate acceptance, I want all of us to recommit to accepting others as they are, understanding their needs and loving them as they want to be loved. And that starts us on the journey of how to communicate well. And before I tell you how to communicate well, I want to highlight some communication barriers and describe what they are so that we can be quick to catch ourselves when we start to go in that direction. The first communication barrier in trying to communicate with others is sometimes we just vent our feelings, you know, of anger or fear, helplessness. You know, feelings can be strong, and sometimes we think we're communicating when we just simply vent. And what we need to do is to collect our emotions and our experiences of the day and be able to communicate them without venting. Some people don't even know the difference between just venting their feelings and communicating. They really think they're communicating. Let me give you an example. Years ago in our community work, we had a young boy come in, and at that time we were doing lots of work with families and adults and children. And a little 9-year-old Joey came in, and he was just so upset. And he said, "Do you have a job that you could give me?" And we looked at him and said, "Joey, why do you need a job? You're only 9 years old." He says, "Oh, my dad came home last night and he told us, 'Family, I just lost my job and I am so worried. I don't know how we're going to survive. How are we going to eat? And he just basically just unloaded this extreme fear onto the family. And this little boy was feeling imminent danger in his family. And so we said to Joey, you know, Joey, it's okay that your dad shared a real experience. He didn't have a good day and he lost his job and it's a big challenge for him. But he can also say, but don't worry, kids. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to be looking for another job. I'm going to activate my resume. I'm going to be, it's my responsibility. It's not your responsibility. And I think sometimes when we're so full of emotions, we have not figured out yet how to handle them. And so we need to know how to handle our feelings and not just vent. So make sure that if you start to vent, you catch yourself. That will be a communication barrier. Another communication barrier is trying to share our needs using criticisms or complaints. And we think that if we are sharing by complaining or criticizing, that we're sharing what we need, and we're not. We're just, it becomes a burden to the listener. You know, we all have that person in our life who does this a lot. And so when they are coming here, we go there. And so we don't want to burden our listener, our spouse, our children, our friends with criticisms and complaints. So if you catch yourself starting to complain or criticize, just stop. I'm going to tell you what to do instead, but just be aware that that's a communication barrier. Another communication barrier is if we try to change the other person. As I mentioned before, we tend to be control freaks. And so it's very important to be able to let people be who they are and not to spend time trying to change them. So if you catch yourself trying to change the other person, catch yourself and say, my job here is to accept this person, to understand this person, not to change them. Another misconception about communication, and it's actually a barrier, is if we reduce it to conflict resolution. Some people only communicate when they have problems. And one lady said in one of our talks, said, wow, if I didn't share my problems, I wouldn't have anything to share. And I said, with compassion, I said, well, you need to get a life because life is more than problems. Yes, we need to know how to solve problems. And in my follow-up talk, I'm going to talk about how to solve problems, but don't merge it in with communication. That becomes a barrier. So I just highlight these 4 things just so that you can, kind of make a mental note and make sure that when you're venting or you start to criticize or complain or you try to change somebody or you instantly go into solving problems all the time whenever you're with your people, just catch yourself and say, that's not communication. That will actually be a barrier. So now, having told you what communication is not and what to be aware of, I'm going to tell you what it is. And it's got 3 components. One is authentic sharing, one is listening, and one is giving feedback. Let's start with this first one. How can we, when we're ready to share with our spouse, with our kids, with our family, how can it be good sharing? And here, I'm encouraging you to think about the meaning of your day. Sharing the meaning of the day, and I'll break it down what that involves. Then when it's our turn to listen to understand, not to argue, not to try to change the person, not to rebut. And then I go from listening to giving feedback that validates the other and promotes greater understanding. So you begin to see the sharer, the listener, then the listener changes places and becomes the sharer with feedback that validates the other. And then when it's our turn to ask for something, to know how to ask for it the right way. So let's talk about how to share the meaning, not just the news. Think about every day there's enough time in that day, if you schedule it, to have some time to share with your family. And you'll notice on the handout, I talk about sharing, prioritize a daily time that you can have with your family. And so right now, as I'm talking, adults in the room, be thinking about a time when, as a family, you can enjoy each other. It might be at dinner time, it might be after dinner, when you're gathered, and having dessert, or, just have a little bit of time when you can share the meaning of your day, not just the things that happen to you. Think about gathering the ingredients of your day, like preparing a meal, and you want to be able to cook the things that happen to you during the day. So you're not just venting or criticizing or complaining. You're able to say, like Joey's father could have said when he came home, wow, today was such a challenge, but I need to tell you guys what happened, because we have to be real. Share what happened, but then if it was challenging, share the solution so that you're not unduly burdening your family. So we equate this share the meaning to like preparing a meal, to serve to others. When it's our time to listen, we listen to understand the person, not to argue or try to change them, and then give some good feedback that tells them, hey, thanks for sharing. I understand where you're coming from now. It's not an opportunity for us to give them unsolicited advice, but to be able to really understand them. And I think listening is difficult for us because we tend to be very full of ourselves. And so here I'm going to share with you what I call the easy listening skills. The EASY. It doesn't mean that they're easy, because some of these steps might be harder for you than others. But this first step, emptying ourselves, is when we start to listen to our child or to our mate or to another, just simply open yourself. It's almost like if somebody came to your front door and you open the door, let the person come into you. Forget about yourself. Create emptiness inside of you. To set aside your thought, your worries, all the things that you need to do that day. Create some emptiness, some space inside. And then what do we do when we invite somebody into our home? We want to make them feel at home. The second step of acceptance is where you not only invite the person who is talking to you into your attention, into your focus, but don't start judging them up here. Really work on having an accepting mind so that as they're sharing, whatever they're sharing, that you accept it without judgment. And this, sometimes we don't realize when we're judging somebody, with our knitted brow and our tight lips, sometimes our facial expressions and our eye contact will convey to the person that we're not listening really well to them, and they get defensive and maybe would not share as much. So make sure that you're truly emptying yourself, to focus on them, to accept them, and not judging them when they share that this thing happened and they dealt with it that way. And, don't immediately get up into your mind saying, oh, I wouldn't have done it that way. They should do it this way. So really be aware of accepting and respecting those differences. The third skill in authentic listening is sensitivity. Focus on fully understanding them. Sometimes we're so quick to understand somebody that we then start dwelling on something else, and we have not stayed engaged with listening well to them. Listen all the way out. Last Sunday in the gospel reading, it was so beautiful where Jesus went to the deaf man, remember? And he said, be opened. And he healed the deaf man and opened his ears. And I think that is a very important thing that needs to happen in us is, are we opening our mind? Are we opening our ears? Are we opening our heart to really empty ourselves, accept the person's differences, focus on understanding? And then why, and easy, is yielding. Listen to the very end. Resist the temptation to interrupt and to give unsolicited advice. And this is something I think we all have to work on. So right now, as I guide you through this little talk, select the one you need to work on this week in authentic listening. What do you need to, I think we need to work on all of them, but what do you specifically need to work on? Do you need to work on emptiness, accepting the other person's differences, being sensitive to the very end, and listening all the way to the very end? The third dynamic, besides sharing and listening, is then give some positive emotional feedback. Don't just be a bump on a log. I had a couple come into my office because as therapists, we see couples and individuals all week long. And this woman was so mad at her husband because she thought he was a lousy listener. But actually, he was a very good listener. He just didn't give any feedback. He was kind of like a bump on a log. And so once he learned to give some feedback, she felt heard. And what that means is that you pay attention and you appreciate what the person has shared with you, that you reinforce it wherever you find it, that you can say, thanks for sharing, now I understand you better. Even if what they just shared is something you don't agree with, you can still give positive reinforcement and say, now I understand you better. And on the little handout under listening, I talk about let the other person know that you appreciate their sharing and that you understand them better. You can always say that to them. And be a good coach. When you want something to convey something to the other person, I want you to see yourself as a coach, to accept, assert, and appreciate. Okay, what do I mean by that?
Claire, we cannot hear you. Did you mute?
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. That when you want to tell somebody what it is you want from them, be a coach, not a critic. And what do I mean by that? Is catch yourself when you start to tell the person what you don't want. And we do that all the time. We always think that if we tell somebody what we don't want, like, oh, I don't like you interrupting, or I don't like when you're late, or that somehow we're telling them what we want, and it's getting lost in translation. And so it's very important that whatever it is you want to share with the other person, that first of all, you replace complaints and criticism with a new language. I like to call it a new language, a language of assertiveness, to say, hey, you know what? The next time I would really prefer, if you're going to be late, give me a call. Or, if you eat dinner, instead of leaving the dirty dishes all around, you take them into the kitchen. Or, you really can use this in any situation where you want something from the other person, your mate, your child, your parent, to just be able to eliminate complaints and criticism and put in the new language and say, you know what, next time I would prefer, and then be very specific. Don't say, I would just prefer you to be nice. Well, what does that mean? Or I would prefer you to be respectful. I don't know what that means. But if you can say, the next time I would prefer, if you make a decision, that you include me in the decision making. That's very specific. The person knows exactly what it is you want, and it's invitational. You're not beating them over the head saying, I can't believe you made a unilateral decision without me, and how rude. And you see how that's complaining and criticizing? So you got to catch yourself to put in the new language, be specific and invitational, and then reinforce it. I had one woman say that her husband always interrupted her and she didn't like it. And she learned to say, honey, I would prefer if you would listen to me to the end. Listen until I finished my point. And he was able to do that. And then she reinforced and said, honey, I really appreciate that. So please express gratitude. Don't just think gratitude like, oh, that was really nice. Express it. The value of gratitude is when we express it to the person. So reinforce gradual feedback. So think about being a coach, not a critic. Now, I've given you some really interesting things, and I want to kind of go through this little handout. If you don't have the handout, you can download it, but it's a reflection sheet that you can be thinking about how to improve your sharing of meaningful experiences, not just the news of the day, how to gather the ingredients of your day to share the meaning versus just dumping on your family members. If something happened that was challenging, like Joey's dad, that you're able to say, you know, I feel very worried about this situation, but this is what I'm going to do about it. And right now, take a moment to prioritize a daily time to share with your family. When can you share with each other? If you live alone, you can connect with a friend or a relative, but figure out a time that you can be sharing with somebody and to share a personal experience, the meaning of your day, not just venting and complaining. Under listening the easy way, let me kind of go back to that slide. Focus on which of these dynamics you want to improve in. Like I mentioned, I think we all need to improve in our listening skills, but on emptying ourselves, this is where you really focus on paying attention. So maybe something that would be helpful is to stop multitasking, because it's so easy. I remember when our son was young, he was about 8, and he was trying to explain something probably about a video game or something. And I was, you know, doing many things in the kitchen, preparing food, whatever. And he got so frustrated. He said, "Mom, you're not listening." And I think we all have to focus on forgetting about multitasking and ourselves at the moment and pay attention. So maybe you underline that. Maybe that's something you can work on. Or it could be accepting the other, even if you disagree. Here, the other person feels accepted by you when you accept his or her difference without judgment, ridicule, rejection. Here, I want you to think about accepting every person in your family. And everybody, respectfully accepting them. Eliminate judging. Maybe you need to focus on being more sensitive, focusing on truly understanding, not just getting a superficial understanding, but to be very active in your listening and to listen to the end, so that in the feedback, think about in the feedback, you could ask them, hey, ask relevant questions, you know, tell me more about this thing that you just shared. Validate them, even if you disagree. You can always say, I'm so glad that you shared that because it helps me understand you better. And then give a non-critical response. Reinforce, just be grateful and say, thank you for sharing it. So now I can understand you better. So think about which of those skills, sharing, listening, positive feedback, you particularly need to work on. Write it off to the side because I want to hear about it in a few minutes from you. And then in being a good coach, what do you need to work on it? You need to learn that new language, and instead of complaining and criticizing, whatever the issue is, to stop yourself, turn it around. Instead of telling people what you don't want, tell them what you want. One lady said, I don't know what I want. And I said, well, you know what you don't want. What's the opposite? And she said, oh, now I understand what I want. And she was able to say, next time I would prefer, and to be very specific and invitational. And then when it started to happen, to not expect perfection, to be able to say every time there's an observable, like in her life, she needed to really focus with her kids on not complaining about their messy rooms and about always yelling at them. And so she really took this to heart, and she began to say, I want to eliminate all nagging, all venting, all complaining, and all criticism. And instead, I want to tell my kids what I would prefer. And she really started working on this, and it made a huge difference in the family. She no longer yelled. When she got frustrated, she would just stop. and gather her emotions, figure out some coping skills to address her frustration. Maybe she needed to lower her standards. Remember, I mentioned about my parents practicing compassionate acceptance, that their level of functioning was here, and I had to reduce my expectation to where they really were and accept them as they are. And I think as parents, we need to do that with our children, be age appropriate, accept them at the level of functioning and keep coaching them to the next level. She did that, and it was very beautiful to see in her family the changes that made. So that what communication is, it's promoting mutual understanding. What we're actually doing is we're enjoying each other more. We're able to, another way of saying it in boosting our communication is we're actually able to enjoy each other more. Later, I'll talk about how to solve problems and how to forgive each other and some of the more serious things. But I think good communication starts us on the path to being able to resolve conflicts better. When we truly respect each other and we are paying attention to each other, then when we have a problem, a difference to work out with each other, then much more highly possible to come to each other and say, I have an issue, this is what is happening, this is what I want. I'll talk about that in a future talk. But I want you to see how communication is the ability to promote unity in the very beginning stages of promoting mutual understanding with each other by paying attention, by sharing the meaning of our day. One man said on the sharing part, he says, well, my family knows what I do. I go to work, I come home, nothing changes. I don't have anything to share. And I said, anything you do out of love is worthy of being shared. And share the fruits of your labors. Think about your day as you drive home. Think about gathering the ingredients of your day, like preparing a meal. I like that metaphor a lot. And cook it. So if something frustrating happened or something sad happened or something anxiety provoking happened, that you cook it so that you're not just venting it out. You find out, how come it happened? What are you going to do about it? So that when you share the reality of your day and being real with each other, you can share that part, but it's not dumping, it's not venting, it's giving them an insight into their day. And then when it becomes so he took that to heart and he said, I realize I don't really have a life. I'm not really thinking about all the things that God is doing during my work hours and coming home. I just kind of endure the day. And so for him, he started to use his driving home time as a moment to collect the thoughts of the day, share a personal experience, to be able to come in and at an opportune moment, have some time of authentic sharing around the table with the family, and that he would share something meaningful so they understood what he was going through, but he would also pay attention and listen to them. So think about where you can grow in your communication skills. And let's go to a few reflections now. So Stephen, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Okay, I don't know how many are there, but how about if, since there are just a few there, I'd like to hear from each of you what was most helpful and what you're going to be working on. Let's hear, if you have a question, let's hear from a few of you. We have a little bit of time here.
So where's the camera? Because I don't know where to say hello.
Here.
Here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So you probably will not see, if you want to move it around or something.
Yeah.
Does anyone have anything they want to share or have a reflection they want to share? Or what?
Oh, hi, Jackie. Hey, good to see you. I'm seeing some familiar faces with our group here. So, hey, Jackie, I'll just call on you because that's what happens when I know you. So I'm going to unmute you. Can you unmute yourself, Jackie?
I forgot to unmute. Okay. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Jackie. Welcome to our Zoom Live.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So Jackie, give a reflection on what is helpful to you, what you're kind of working on right now.
You know what? for years, I've been working on all of this. I do have a husband with the bipolar order condition,
Yes.
and it comes and goes. He's himself like 60%, and then the other part takes over. So when he is him, this is so much reassurance for me, Claire, because I've
I'm glad.
learned these throughout the year. So when I see this, it tells me I'm kind of doing it okay, but still a work in progress every day. It doesn't change. So you have to live this. This is Bible, honestly.
Exactly. Exactly. And also you have to take into consideration the level of functioning of the person that you are communicating with, whether it's our child or mate. If this person, like in your case, has a mental illness, you know, maybe maybe they're very tired. You know, a person who didn't sleep the night before isn't going to be real good at focusing. So we have to keep focusing on paying attention, and also pick a good time to share, because sometimes we're not really good at timing of communication. We just want to come in and like blah, and maybe it's not a good time. So if it's not a good time, just
I've learned
have the person wait until it is a good time.
It is timing, because every day for us is a little different.
Yes.
So I have to go with each and everything that you've said and switch it and do it and accept it, and really just listening, because
Yes.
yeah, I'm not in his shoes, so I will never understand the real extreme, but I live with it because I'm living with him. But
Exactly.
we've been separated over the summer, but it's kind of been good because I was going through my own thing. But this works on me, and this works on him and our family. So this is
Oh, good.
what I teach my family.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that, Jackie. Yeah, we have to keep working on the art of being family, and to paying attention, and to know how to keep sharing, and to know how to listen, and how to give feedback that's not critical, and
Critical, yes.
yeah, complaining, you know. In the next few talks, I'm going to be talking about how to solve problems, but also how to handle some of the emotions that contribute to the problem. You know, we can have problems, and then we can have just our frustration and the way that we talk to each other. So in communication, which is just becoming mindful of appreciating the other person, it's not solving problems. I'll get to that in another talk, and not smooshing communication with problems, because sometimes people think any little bit of time we have, let's just solve problems. And that's why we need to create a daily ritual. And I'd like to hear from some of you. Do you have a daily time? I kind of call it a ritual of intimacy, to talk with each other and to share. Let's hear from some of the
I have a question, Claire. Can you see
Rose,
me?
go for it.
I have a question. So what's this like when your partner has not heard this yet? Can they learn by just you using your assertiveness skills? Can you just say, hey, next time I'd like you to just listen to me? Or next time I just want you to listen to understanding. I mean, can you really coach someone who has not heard your presentation here today into learning how to communicate better? Like, can they learn just by you being assertive?
Yeah, I call assertiveness a new language. It's whenever we need to share what we need with others. You know, it's beyond just communication skill. It's just with everything. It's just whenever we need to convey what we want, we need to do it the right way. And we need, first of all, to eliminate complaints and criticisms. Okay, show of hands, how many of us think we're communicating what we want by complaining? I think everybody could say, "Oh, I thought I was conveying what I wanted," but in criticizing or complaining, we're telling somebody what we don't want. So just pause, take a moment to say it the right way, and say, you know, instead of jumping down their throat if they interrupted you, or, you know, if you were expecting somebody to do a job and they didn't do it very good, and you're prone to start becoming critical, just kind of catch yourself and say, I don't want to be critical. I don't want to nag. I don't want to vent. I don't want to complain. I don't want to, you know, try to, you know, control freak them into doing what I want. I just want to tell them what I want. And so take a moment to reflect on a moment when you would maybe normally criticize or complain. Stop, turn it around, and say, next time I would prefer this. Does that make sense, Rose?
Yeah, it does.
I think we all have to work on that. You know, we're so prone to complaining and criticizing. You know, one person said, I've been telling my family what I want and they don't listen. And I said, well, you gotta look at when do you talk to that person? You know, in this case, the wife was complaining about her husband, and I said, under what circumstances is he not listening? She says, well, I guess I didn't pick the right time. He was watching a program he really liked, and I came in, I said, honey, we have to talk. And he didn't want to talk right then, and she got offended. So the first step in communication is pick the right time. And so I encourage all of you, look at your day where you could work in a little bit of time to have some time to share the meaning of your day. When would that be? Anybody want to share?
Anybody else want to have an idea of when would be the best time to share?
And you know, it might change. You might say, well, you know, for my husband and I, we use breakfast every morning as a time to share the meaning of the day before. If it wasn't an emergency that we had to jump on right away, it can wait. And we don't share anything heavy duty at night, but for us, it works out in the morning to share. And remember, communication is not solving problems. So you have to also remember what communication. Do we need to have time to solve problems? Yes, but it's not every day. And so I'll talk about that at another talk about, you know, how to set aside time maybe once a week to solve a problem. But don't let that contaminate the ability to just have some enjoyable time together. So when might that be? Rose, in your family, when might that be?
Actually, I can. It's Steven. So when I drive my kid to school, actually, that's like 20 minutes, but it's just like the best time we have. And then we chat about everything. Yeah, when I pick them up, chat about schools, how they're feeling, everything. So that is like a really private, personal time, just the kid and I in the car.
Yes.
And we just talk.
Very good. It's like our cars become our little caravans, our little, you know, our little sanctuary. You know, we use our cars, you know, so when we're picking up kids, and we can use that time if you're doing a road trip. Absolutely. So, and sometimes that can be every day. When is another time that y'all share? Jackie, what's a good moment?
So with Dave, we do a midday, mid-afternoon. We'll either come home from lunch or do wherever, if we're doing errand, we'll come and sit in the backyard, and we just sit there and talk. So mid-afternoon. Now I also live with my young adult daughters, and
Yes.
I love how they have an open mind and they're learning and everything. So I have to choose words to because living with them is easy, but not easy at times. But I choose words because and we can be just an evening. I wait till we come home, we all unwind, and then we're watching something on TV and we're on a good mood. Then I pick a little topic and we just start, and it's
Awesome.
good. But I choose words because, you know, they're just learning and they're figuring out life. So I don't want to offend or over, you know,
very good.
Make them feel bad. So
Very
that's
good.
more in the evenings with the girls. Yeah.
Very good.
In afternoons. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, we have to, you know, have time where both parties are able to communicate.
Yeah.
You know, it could be around the table, it could be in the backyard, it could be picking up kids from school. We just need to, you know, on most days, have some time to pay attention to each other and to share with each other. Remember what communication is. Sometimes I ask groups that I'm talking to, what do you think the main purpose of communication is? And I get all kinds of answers. Sometimes people say, well, I guess communication is to get my point across. And I say, well, not only. Other people say, well, I want to listen to people and understand them. I say, okay, better, but that's not the whole thing. It's really to promote mutual understanding. Think about communication. When people feel mutually understood and valued and appreciated, we're happier. We just feel so much better with each other versus being judged and not listened to and told what to do. So think about communication as a beautiful way to enjoy each other. Now, what happens when you have good communication and you are enjoying each other and you're understanding each other and you're valuing each other? Guess what? you realize how really different you are. And the differences are what start to cause the conflicts. So I always tell people parenthetically or paradoxically, the better you communicate and understand each other, guess what? The more problems you're going to have. And I don't want you to be scared by the word problem. I just want you to think that the problem is the differences. You think this way, I think that way, I feel this way, you feel that way. The closer we are, which is good, because some families, they're so afraid of conflict and those differences, they don't know what to do with differences, that they don't even communicate. They don't want to get close because there's a fear of intimacy. Why? Because there's a fear of conflict. So I want you guys to give yourself permission and encouragement and be very focused on creating more enjoyable time to communicate with each other. Don't be afraid of the differences. We have to know how to integrate our differences well, with respect and wisdom, but don't be afraid, because it's supposed to be that way. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, I like that. That
Does
reassures.
that make sense?
Yeah.
Sometimes people think, well, okay, we got good communication, but we got a lot of problems. In fact, I have a lot of couples that come into my office and they'll say, our number one problem is communication. And I always say, really? I'm a little skeptical, because really the issue is they have not learned how to solve their problems. And so they don't want to talk to each other. And that's why they're not talking. And they think communication is the issue. The issue is, no, are you, when you understand your differences, are you respecting the differences? Are you allowing the other person to be who they are? Of course, without being abusive, being disrespectful. I'm not talking about putting up with anything disrespectful or abusive. I'm just talking about differences. And most of our differences are just, I think this way, I want to eat this food, you want to eat this food. I want to listen to this music, you want to listen to that. I want to spend the money this way, you want to spend the money that way. I want to raise the kid this way, you want to raise it that way. So there's nothing wrong with those differences. The problem with that problem is if we don't listen to each other and don't work on a win-win together. Does that make sense? I don't want to get too much into the conflict resolution because I'm going to focus on that later, but I want to separate it from communication. And I want you guys to feel like, wow, we need to have some regular time to communicate. Now I want to hear from the other side of the room. Let's hear from a couple of you guys. What do you need to improve in? And you're sharing and you're listening and you're giving feedback. What has your name written all over it?
I think Kristen wants to share something.
Kristen.
I enjoyed the conversation, I enjoyed the discussion, and I realized and identified that my homework one is to identify a time where we can communicate, because my husband and I have these bizarre, wacky schedules that never line up. We don't get home at the same time. Sometimes he's gone until late in the evening, and I'm telling my son.
Rose, maybe you can. Rose, maybe you can say it louder so I can't hear.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
It's hard because the microphone isn't here.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Let's focus on her.
Yeah, say it again.
Say it again, if you don't
I
mind.
was saying that the things I need to that I have identified that I need to work on first is picking out a time to communicate with my husband, because we have such different work schedules
Yes.
that it's hard to kind of line up. Some days, we're both, get home at the same time and we can have that discussion, whether it's taking our son to an activity in the car or it's
Yes.
at dinner.
Yes.
He likes to eat a lot later than everybody else. He's usually not hungry by the time we're hungry. So
Yes.
it's just identifying a time, whether it's may not be, I'd like it to be every day, whether it's just, maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes to just communicate and say, hey, look, how was your day? Let's talk about what went on during the day, what you learned, what you picked up,
Yes.
or what you gained from today. So that's the first thing that I need to, I identify that I'm going to work on is working with him and working with our son to find out.
Yeah, so you got to have a time that works for both of you, so you can share the meaning of your day. If you're taking a road trip and you got lots of time, then you can talk about all the yada yadas, all the news, all that. Well, this happened. You can really go into the scenic route of sharing, but most people don't have a whole lot of time. So if you can kind of what I call a cup of coffee time every day, it takes about 20 to 30 minutes to drink a cup of coffee. If you can just scratch out and make a ritual of intimacy 20 to 30 minutes on most days, where you can sit with your spouse, significant other, share the meaning of your day. And is your name Kristen?
Yes, yes.
Kristen, if your husband is not here, what you could also do, and many couples are doing this, is get our book, Thriving Marriages. And it's thin. See how thin it is? It's 12 little chapters, and some couples actually do a chapter a week, or a chapter every 2 or 3 weeks. You might want to, work on some of those skills and share with each other, how you are communicating better, how you're balancing your life, how you're increasing your empathy. But yeah, I like that you focus on getting a time together. Kristen, just to follow to the next level, in speaking, listening, and giving feedback, which area is speaking to you to improve?
Definitely listening. I've been told that before, that I kind of, he'll talk to me and say something. Yeah, listening, because it's kind of like he'll say something, and a lot of times when his discussion involves a lot of details. So I'll miss something, and then he asks me, "What do you think?" And I'm thinking, I don't want to know what he said. So it's definitely focusing on the listening part. So I guess to couple it with that, I have to forget myself and then just focus on listening.
Yeah.
As opposed to.
So remember the easy listening skills. Empty ourselves so we can pay attention, accept the person's differences, because that's when a lot of times we stop listening, inside our head, we're going, what? I wouldn't have done it that way. And they should, so don't have another dialogue going on. It's like listening to 2 radio stations at the same time. It gives you a headache. So really focus on paying attention to the person with the time that you have. And emptying yourself, accepting them, sensitive to understanding, and yield all the way to the end. But also you might need to figure out a time when you can talk, because if you've got 5 minutes and the person needs to talk 10 or 15 minutes, you don't want to be caught in trying to listen to them and trying to get out the door to go to work. So very important to have some time.
It is so good. I wish we had more time, but it's time to end this, isn't it, Sister Mary Hahn? I wish we had more time, Sarah. This was really awesome.
Wonderful.
And I can't wait for next week. We're gonna have a chance to really share and talk about this. So please come back.
Wonderful.
It's
It's good to be with all of you, and I hope to see you again at the Solve a Problem, how to